Hey everyone, I hope you had a nice coffee break and then present amount of caffeine is keeping you awake for the next lecture, number 6 on Avatamsaka Sūtra. Now, I just need to do one more thing before we actually start to read chapter after chapter, which is explaining how this Avatamsaka Sutra is structured. First of all, this whole structure kind of reminds me of opera. It's very operatic and dramatic, and then this has been said so for centuries. Considering how culturally affluent in the area where Avatamsaka Sutra was composed at that time, and way before that, Greek already has theaters and all of that. So I'm sure in India and then all these Silk Road nations must have some sort of sense of or real existence of some theaters. I don't know about operatic theaters, but they must have some sort of sense of creating audio-visual stage-like composition of sutras. But it is quite amazing. And also, I have asked Michelle to put this on website. So I'm going to show this to you on the shared screen. But on our website, if you go to Avatamsaka Sutra page, I placed this structure and theme in here. So I'm going to explain this looking at this. Now, I'm just going to read this. There are two major translations of Avatamsaka Sutra, Kengon Kyo, which actually there are more, but I wanted to explain a little more succinctly. And the other versions I already have explained in July a little more in detail. But those versions that came to, let's say, Eastern Asian nations, including actually Indonesia, the older translation is called 60 Kegon, 60 Kegon, and is also translated, traditionally known as Shinyaku. Shinyaku is this word Shin is the name of the dynasty in China when this was translated. It was translated into Chinese by Buddha Bhadra in the 5th century and has 34 chapters. And this is the one that came to all over the places, including Korea. Korea was, at that time, almost like a center of Avatamsaka Sutra study. And even now, Avatamsaka Sutra is really shared as a primary Buddhist text by everybody in Buddhist community in China, Korea. And also this is the version that came to Japan and created a huge wave of cultural influence. And then the newer translation is called the 80 Kegon, and it's also known as Toyaku. This To is Tang, Tang dynasty. Tang dynasty is To, Tang is pronounced as To in Japanese. It was translated by Shikashananda in the late 7th century and has 39 chapters. This is the version we have in English. In Buddhist nations throughout Asia, the 60 Kegon version has had the strongest impact, and most of the important commentaries are based on it, including the current contemporary commentaries, such as the textbooks I use when I go to Todaichi's lecture series, which I explained earlier on. So English translation by this Bhikshu we were using as a text is a translation of the 80 Kegon version. Since these lectures will often refer to the commentaries on the 60 Kegon version, it is helpful to know, particularly for myself, to know these two versions and how these versions are related, particularly because in the English translation, it is very difficult for me to what exactly they are talking about. And when I take a look at the original Sino-Japanese version, I can immediately tell, oh yes, the reason is I already explained in the previous lecture, because of the terminology doesn't have consensus among the translators here in America. So it can be translated various different ways, and you don't know what they are talking about. While in China, Japan, we do have had already established Buddhist terminology, so we know when we say something, what we are talking about, something specific. So therefore, this chart is for that, and also I wanted to explain traditionally this original. I'm just going to blatantly call this 60 Kengon as original. The teachings, but you know this is not the original. I already explained, but teachings are offered at the 7 different sites as a dramatic theatrical manner. So you can actually think, let's say you go to see a long theater, and then this whole theater, the story of the theater play is explaining, changes the scene 7 different times. So it's a scene change, scenery change, and then in each scene there's a different group of the people. So that's called assembly. Yeah, so this is why in Japanese it is often described as Shichisho Hachie. Shichisho Hachie meaning directly meaning 7 sites and 8 assemblies. Now 80 Kengon is an extended version of 60 Kengon, and has but also keeps the similar structure. Even though I also talked about this a little bit, but 80 Kengon keeps adding things, and also has almost like an obsession of the number 10. So in 60 Kengon, something is explained rather succinctly, and then 80 Kengon has to repeat the same thing 10 different ways. So that's why it's longer and longer and longer, but the main structure is still the same. So the bone marrow is still the same. And then I think it is very interesting to actually see how this is structured. So I want to explain this a little bit. And then also theme, or development of a theme is quite kind of succinctly understandable, even though actual reading of the sutra goes on and on and on and on and on. But if you really do know this, it's actually easier for you to keep on reading. The reason is there are the 3 themes, and it's divided quite clearly. And theme 1 is Buddha Dharma, of course. Again, I have to say repeatedly over and over and over, what the Buddhist teaching is about is what it is and how to be in this what it isness. And what it is normally called Buddha Dharma, Buppo, or and how to be in this Buddha Dharma is Buddha way. And so the first one, they actually explain what we are talking about. So this is a true nature and formation of Dharmakaya. It's the word Avatamsaka Sūtra likes to use, but the true nature and formation of Dharmakaya is what it is, how this whole universe is made. So in my word, it is what it is, and it goes from chapter 1 to chapter 6 in the English translation, 80 Kengon version, but in the originally it's a 60 version, it's chapter 1. So in another word, in the English translation text we are using, it's an extensive version of what 60 Kengon talks about in 1 chapter, made it into 6 chapters. I think it's interesting, particularly once you get into this, or you have a taste on the style of how Avatamsaka Sūtra likes to talk, which is quite beautiful. And particularly if you are trying to kind of read it out loud as if it's a recitation, you can kind of get into this whole like mood of, how do you say, very ornamented beauty. And And then theme 2 is, of course, Buddha way. In another word, of course, everywhere they are talking about the Buddha Dharma and the Buddha way, but the emphasis of the first theme is Buddha Dharma, and then next emphasis changes into, so, what shall we do? And that's from chapter 7 to 38, which means almost the entire largest portion of Avatamsaka Sūtra is really about the actual practice of Bodhisattva, how to be. And then chapter 39 is, as I mentioned several times, it is originally one sutra, and then this one sutra is added into as the conclusion portion of Avatamsaka Sūtra. And then this is again Buddha way, but it's more detailed expression of Bodhisattva practice as depicted in Sudana. Sudana is the main character of this chapter, or one specific sutra, which takes up more than 1/3 of this whole sutra. Oh, excuse me, share the screen is back again. Okay, so we are talking about the Sudana's way-seeking journey. And one thing that's really interesting about this, how do I say that, scene change, stage change, is a stage starts with, how do I say this? I use the word this world with a lack of vocabulary. But this starts with the actual site that still exists on this planet, so to speak. But of course, it's a kind of metaphor. So I didn't know how to explain this, so I just did a quotation in this world. And then starting from this on the planet or on the ground, stage changes into the heaven, so to speak. In Buddhist cosmology, this world of desire actually is not just this world, but also extends into heavenly world. So, and it goes into the heaven, and then expounding the Dharma continues, and then comes back to this on the ground or on this planet, and then it continues. So this is a very inclusive, including this huge universe. So this actually gives even more sense of Avatamsaka Sutra's bigness, so to speak, which we really talked about as a characteristic of this. And then just following this very quickly, and so chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, is up to here. It's a Vairochana chapter in 60 Kegon. Now, what is Vairochana is very important. So in this sutra, main character is depicted as a Vairochana Buddha. We briefly mentioned it, but I'm going to give a detailed explanation of Vairochana Buddha once we actually go into this chapter later. And then curious portion is that the Vairochana Buddha is the main character, true main character, and he is, well, there's no gender, but this Buddha is always there, but he doesn't say a word, which is a very important portion as a metaphor. And instead, who talks, it changes by scene, but the majority of that, in another word, main core of the leaders of the speakers are Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. And as I mentioned again, Samantabhadra Bodhisattva is the symbolic way of talking about our own Bodhisattva action. Yes? Again, Vairochana Buddha is a symbolic way of talking about the Buddha Dharma. And in the Buddha Dharma, this Samantabhadra Bodhisattva, as a Buddha way speaker, is speaking as a main leader of the speakers. And then it goes into whole of universal light. This whole of universal light is also very interesting because traditionally many scholars who tackled on this vast sutra did quite incredible researches. We're not talking about the 19th century, but ever since the beginning of the history of Avatamsaka Sutra, someone always thought, like, so where is this whole of universal light? So after 1,700 years afterward, what we actually currently know is that the first place this sutra is expanded is Bodh Gaya. This is an actual site in India, in the former area called state of Magadha, where legend goes there was a tree there, and under the tree Gautama Buddha decided to sit, and then after 8 days he got enlightened. So from that site, this site is still kind of maintained, even though for centuries it was really destroyed and no one really paid attention. But some centuries ago, again, there's a restoration movement of a Buddhist site, and then they restored it. So the current site, many of those people actually go as a pilgrimage, is a restored site, but it is the same site, yeah? And then from there, about, let's see, 10 kilometers. I don't know if you have an idea of kilometers, but I don't know how many miles in kilometers. Does anybody know? Oh, you can Google it later on. But anyway, it's walkable. 1 kilo, let's see, 1.6, it's okay. 1.6 kilometers is 1 mile, I think. Yes, so it's a walkable mileage, and this is at the bend of Naranja River. There is a building. In those days in India, in the town, you created something like a town hall kind of building, which is utilized as a public hall. And this public hall can be somewhere where you host some important travelers who needed a place to rest. And also, if you have some speakers you need to speak to the townsmen, you also host this speaking event in this place, etc., etc. It's like a multiple usage building. It's a bit like a Catherine's Zendo. It's a multiple usage, not only Zendo. So anyway, there is actually a place like that. And then probably the creators of this Avatamsaka Sutra knew those things, and then probably placed this site in the, actual site. So in another word, let's imagine Gautama Buddha got enlightened under the Bodhi tree and then starts to speak. And then after that, he decided to speak to larger group of the people, because the first group of the people, I'm going to explain this later, is basically deities, gods and goddesses. So he really needs to speak to the humans, right? Shujo, ordinary people. And then he walks along the river. This Naranja River is a very important river for him, because this is where he decided to bathe and clean and received milk porridge from Sujata, and then he strengthened himself to decided to sit through these 8 days. Anyway, then he went there and he starts to talk. And very often this sutra does not make a clear distinction between Gautama Buddha and Vairochana Buddha. So that's also a very important portion. It's all spoken as a symbol and also spoken as a metaphor. And then chapter 7, chapter 8, chapter 9. And then I just want to give you a little bit of a preview. Chapter 9 is a Radiant Enlightenment is the title of this chapter. This radiant, again, American English translation does not follow any kind of consensus. It just varies by translator. But this word, komyo, please take a look, is the famous word. Dogen utilizes the word pretty often. Okumura Roshi likes to use the English translation as a radiant light. Isn't that what it was? Recently, Okumura Roshi's, study intensive picks up the subject of Komyo Zo Zanmai. It's the same komyo, so it's the same radiant. This komyo is a Sino-Japanese translation of Sanskrit word aloka, radiant light. So we will probably talk about the Dogen's writing in this chapter when we actually examine this chapter. And then chapter 10, chapter 11, again, I just want to say a little bit about this. In this chapter 11, please take a look at the original word. Jogyobon is translated as a pure conduct. Yes? And then several chapter later, chapter 16 is translated Brahma conduct is Bongyobon. Bongyo and Jogyo is actually same thing in Sino-Japanese lingo. But I guess translator really didn't want to give the same title. So therefore, they used the word Brahma conduct. But this Brahma conduct is the origin of the word. Originally, Brahma was transliterated with this word Bon. But eventually, when this word Bon was incorporated into Buddhist terminology, it means pure conduct. So, in another word, chapter 16 and chapter 11, talking about the same pure conduct, but with different under the different title. But it is not about the Brahman's, practice. Brahman, the word Brahma also meaning changes into Mahayana Buddhism. And then side 3, we are going into heavenly place. So therefore, just in case you might like to know, these are 6 heavenly places in desire realm. It's Rokuyokten's translation is 6 desire realm. And then these are the realms. And then throughout, I think there are 4 of these actually picked in the Avatamsaka Sūtra as a site of the expanding Dharma, and goes up and down throughout in this heavenly realm. Chapter 13, 14, and 15, 16, we just mentioned about it, 17, 18, and then site changes at this chapter 19 into Suyama Heaven Palace, another heaven, and then 20, 21, 22, and then site 5, next site will change in chapter 23 into Tusita Heaven Palace, and then in chapter 26, again, sight changes into another heavenly realm with, this is very difficult to pronounce immediately. Pranirmita Vashavati heaven palace. And then there's this Jujigyo comes, 10 grounds. This was also originally an independent sutra and pre-existed Avatamsaka Sutra. So I just showed this. This is my version of Jujigyo, which is quite well known among us in Eastern Asian Buddhist countries. But the reason why I pointed out is both Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu wrote a detailed commentary on this. Isn't that interesting? I think so. And of course, Nagarjuna's commentary is looking at the Avatamsaka Sutra from middle way, Majjhimika direction, or Majjhimika side. And then Vasubandhu is really taking a look at it from very focused on this world is consciousness only type of teachings. So we will probably look into this later. And then chapter 27, while we are flying, took a flight into the heaven and went up and down into the heavenly places. We finally comes back to land back into this world, back to this whole of universal light at chapter 27. And then this 80 version has 2 assemblies in back in whole of universal light, and then lastly it goes to Jeta Grove. You probably know this. Jeta Grove was historically speaking, it is probably true. Most of the academics and scientists, academics and scholars agree it probably was the first site of the monastery given to Gautama Buddha. But currently, Buddhist academics agree upon that during the lifetime of Gautama Buddha, there was no such a thing like a monastery. It was probably created after his death, so it was more like a garden or a place to stay for him and his group of people. The monastery was built much later on after Gautama Buddha's death, and for centuries, right now it's just a flattened land, but before, around the time Muslim power invaded into subcontinent of India, and then whole India actually leaned toward Muslim. That actually punctuates as the end of Indian Buddhism. I think it was 11th century or 12th century. Around that time, Dogen was really being active and kind of in his mind wanting to go to India. And we often say, oh, it's really lucky that he didn't make an attempt to go to India, because by that time, India was invaded by outer power, which was Muslim group of people, and Buddhist sites were being destroyed and wiped out. But anyway, so that, I think that's probably 11th to 12th century, if I remember correctly. But anyway, this was originally a quite flourishing Buddhist academic site for centuries. It goes back there, and then in there, this entering Dharma realm, chapter 39, again, it was originally called Gandhabhyuha Sutra, and then this takes up almost 1/3 of this huge Avatamsaka Sutra, goes into chapter 39. About chapter 39, I mentioned it in introduction, but just very briefly, I don't know how long this Avatamsaka Sutra lecture series goes on and on and on. In my mind, I think it takes about 3 to 5 years. So we never know what will be, how we will be in 3 years and 5 years from now on. So just in case I may disappear, if you're listening to this and eventually eventually reaching chapter 39, chapter 39, in here, there's a way seeker whose name is Sudana. Sorry, I always remember this, his name in Japanese name. So he is instructed, why don't you go visit this person, that person, this person? And then he visits 53 persons, and then including the first consultation and the last consultation, that's 55 sites. But 53 bodhisattvas he's going to visit around. And many of those and each one of the 53 bodhisattvas gives a teaching. And then it's a surprising variation of the people they are talking about. One of them, very interesting portion is that many of them comes from the type of, how to say, social group. Normally, people don't really have an entry into. In other words, in India, there was this controversial caste system, but it includes the what they call untouchable. So the untouchable is also a teacher, bodhisattva in this. And also it includes sense of, I mentioned this Avatamsaka Sūtra on the process of establishment. There are lots of merchants who is also a traveler on the ocean comes. So there's a lot of ocean image. One of the really beautiful portion is a second site this man is going to visit. It is Sagaramega. It's a kind of ocean king, and there's this incredibly beautiful image of ocean expanding the Dharma. And curiously, this portion is, do you remember Sawaki Roshi's famous word, self selves self? Yes? Shikantaza, in Shikantaza, what we are doing is self selves self. Yeah? And then you can read this portion and you can immediately think, oh, what they are expanding is ocean, oceans, ocean. So it's a beautiful portion and it's very Dogen, I think. And then another portion, it's really interesting. And if you ever stays with us, or if I actually stay in this body and mind in the next 3-5 years, and if we ever go into chapter 39 together, these are the places I really like to explain a lot. One of them is a very controversial portion. It is a person whose name is Basmitra. Is also one of the teachers this way seeker visits. This Basmitra is in a soft word, it's a courtesan, but it's a prostitute. And then how she expands the Dharma is so carnal. It is about carnal bliss. And then traditionally, many people wondered, why is this person is among the 53, and what exactly does this mean? And from 21st century New York situation, I think we can illuminate this in a very different way. So this is something I'm really looking forward to. And also it includes the people who is negated by Mahayana Buddhism, such as ascetic practitioner who really tries to punish the body. And then why is this included? And also the king who gives severe punishment to the person who he thinks wrong. So why? So particularly in this almost like height of a beautiful Mahayana way of understanding Dharma, why are these importantly included, and what is the reason? How should we read this? Is something we can really look forward to. So anyway, this is the structure. And as you can tell, this is chapter 39. The last portion is really a detailed Buddha Dharma, Buddha way, a Bodhisattva's way described in the form of a journey. Alright, so finally, let's go into the chapter 1. I think we are ready now. So now we finally go into chapter 1, chapter by chapter examination, exploration, and receiving the teaching from each chapter. At the beginning, I have to tell you, usually in the lecture series, when we read Buddhist scriptures, I like to explain every single word and every single phrases, every single line by line. But with Avatamsaka Sutra's case, it's too bulky to do so. So what I like to do is I'm going to explain what is going on in the chapter, and then I pick the portions of that I feel very important and kind of legitimate for our practice now, 21st century, in a very modern society. But if you do read Avatamsaka Sutra, and if you have some specific portion you really like to have the portion explained in detail, please send me an email and please specify what portion on what page of this book, because as I said, this 80 Kengon is so repetitive. So therefore, if you just send me this portion, I can't really tell where. So if you can tell me chapter such and such, page such and such, this portion, I like you to expand a little more, and then I will be able to do that. Otherwise, you will be listening to my pick, but my pick is the portion I was taught by several teachers from Avatamsaka school and other schools, the teachers who are quite well learned about Avatamsaka Sutra. So in another word, it's more like common consensus portion, which each portion is regarded as a very important portion. Now, to start with, as I just mentioned, a very brief history of Buddhism, or development, or not always like a linear development, but evolution, even though sometimes evolution means stepping back or making mistakes, sidestepping. A little briefly in the earlier session. One thing I really like you to pay attention is around the time Avatamsaka Sutra was written and composed and also edited, this is the time when newly influential so-called Mahayana Buddhism is now creating counter-statement to otherwise stagnated older version of understanding of Buddha's teaching, which I often refer as Abhidharma age or many school age, very often Abhidharma. Let's see, arisal of early Mahayana Buddhism is BC 1st to 1st century, and then it develops into and deepens into 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century. Now, Abhidharma is, let's see, there's a crossing over. Very often people thought there was a ancient Buddhism time, and then there's Abhidharma time, or many school Buddhism time, and then there's a early Mahayana time. But it didn't really evolve so clearly of course, everything was always like phase of mixed. Things are always never really that simple. About 10, 15 years ago, I think, there was a excavation in the current northern Pakistan. So this is, I believe, shortly before that area became very dangerous. The academics were still were able to have an access to all these archaeological sites and was able to excavate. Curious thing is northern Pakistan, Afghanistan, current Afghanistan was once at the arisal of new Mahayana Buddhism, was the height of the Buddhism, was the center of the Buddhism. So there are lots of important excavation sites, archaeological sites, but unfortunately we don't really have an access anymore. But shortly before access was negated, they were able to excavate this large monastery and then discovered many interesting new things, or proved some theories was actually quite correct. One of the things that really struck me was they were able to entirely retrieve the library area of this huge monastery. And in this library, it shows they were actually studying Padicanon composed during Abhidharma time and early Mahayana Buddhist text together. So obviously already around that time there was some sort of comparison study was going on, just like we do now. So it's quite unfortunate that we in 21st century modernized nations, people who are interested in Buddhism still don't have that type of information. And taking, for instance, Padicanon translated as it is the real authentic true sutra. That has been already overcome by many of those researches. So it's very interesting that in those days it was a questioning time, in few centuries before that they were explaining these things, but we actually don't think so. And this is the new way to, or probably true way to understand Gautama Buddha's original teaching, etc., etc. Another thing which is a little different from what we are talking about was, in Satipatthana Sūtra, which I mentioned in earlier time, there's a portion, this is a very famous portion. Part of the meditation practice was going to see the dead bodies of the people in charnel ground. And then there was a debate over this may be some kind of symbolic way of talking about it, and it's probably not such a thing. And particularly now, I don't think this sutra is asking us to go to charnel ground. To start with, there's no charnel ground anymore, so maybe this is just a symbolic way. But what happened was this site of excavation, archaeological site, it was basically side by side what the old text calls cold or cool forests, which is their way of naming of charnel ground. Of course, so therefore, yeah, it is quite understandable. This was probably a part of a real practice process. And then, of course, just like many other sites, this was right before, off from, walled, gated cities. So therefore, they were actually outside of the gated, walled cities, which gives you kind of a clear light of what exactly Bodhidharma meant when he said Musho Kakunen. Remember the famous story about emperor asked Bodhidharma come to the court, and then he was not very nice. I don't think he wasn't nice, but he was probably not able to speak courteous Chinese at that time because he's Indian and he just probably arrived in India. And then he was actually giving a very precise, down to the point answer. But, you know, this emperor says, I'm a big fan of Buddhism, and so to receive merits, I built this temple and I did this and I did that, I did that, I did this, all of this for the Dharma. What kind of merits do I receive? And he says, none. And then emperor thought, wow, he's so rude. Who are you standing in front of me? You're so rude. And he says, I don't know. He didn't say, I don't know. He said, not knowing. Yeah. And then he also mentioned, so what is the most important thing, portion of the Buddha's teaching? And he says, kakunen musho. Yes. And kakunen musho is often translated in English. Kakunen portion is, there is nothing. So it's like a complete emptiness. And the musho is, in vis-a-vis emperor's question about what kind of sacred, you know, I did so much sacred things. What kind of sacred merits do I get? So he's basically saying there's no sacred or non-sacred. And then kakunen portion was often translated as there is nothing. But if you really take a look at the Chinese character, kakunen is the origin of the kanji is outside of the gate. So therefore, there's no longer wall. So there's no divisiveness anymore. So in another word, kakunen is not about there is none or nothingness. It is about there's no more diviseness between me versus you, subject by object, sacred versus secular. So it's a very interesting way of describing Dharma. You know, from actual picture of this excavated site, you can kind of think, oh, okay, that's actually what he meant, you know. So yeah, I think this was very interesting. Well, it's too bad that we don't really have an access to those places anymore, and many of those places were actually bombed out, including that the Pamians, you know, carved Buddha, etc., etc. The most recent documentary I saw was a Japanese national broadcasting system made a special access to that area of Pamian, you know, carved Buddha, right before it was bombed out. It was the site of those jihads group hiding, and then they were placing mines on the ground and then cliffs, so that these reporters from Japanese National Broadcasting System got a permission to get in, but had to have a local guide to walk through those areas. So I guess I don't know if I will ever get to visit those places in my lifetime. But anyway, let's continue. Of course, the reason why I was talking about this, please take a look at your page 13. It starts with chapter 1, the wondrous adornments of the leaders of the world. Starts with this word, thus I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was in the state of Magadha, where he was abiding in accordance with, etc., etc. Yeah? So, this is the portion we really need to start to pay attention. It starts from the beginning. Thus I have heard is, let's see, did I have, hold on, I made probably, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't make a note to show you on maybe I can write this. Hold on. Yeah, I got it. So on the shared screen, thus I have heard is a translation of this word. I'm going to make it a little larger. Nyoze gamon is how we pronounce it, but nyoze, thus, this way, I heard. And then this is translated as, thus I have heard. Thus I have heard originated from the this legendary, most possibly it is loosely based on the historic event. Most of us believe so, and most of the Buddhist academia thinks it is probably something like that happened, which means when Gautama Buddha died, many of those students felt we really need to correct what exactly Gautama Buddha taught. Because by that time, there are so many people came and go. Many people probably started to hear, well, I heard Gautama Buddha said this. But then someone said, oh, but I don't think so. I heard this. So there were a little bit of a discrepancy going on. So for the effort of keeping Gautama Buddha's real teaching, they assembled people. And then you remember Ananda, who was Gautama Buddha's blood relation, and then but he was quite much younger than Gautama Buddha, and he stayed with Gautama Buddha for nearly over 2 decades as a personal attendant. So therefore, people thought Ananda would be a good person to kind of memorize and recite what he has heard. So what they did was they initially, the legend goes, they asked 100 original students of Gautama Buddha at one site, and they invited Makakashapa, who they really trusted. By this time, Shariputra has already died. So therefore, Makakashapa is one of the oldest, and also Gautama Buddha always trusted Makakashapa. There's a remnant of that all over the places in the oldest layer of Pali Canon. Oh, by the way, the reason why we can say oldest layer, etc., is based on these huge efforts over 150 years of those academic scholars, and also particularly since 1970s, we have this new high technology coming in. So, and also development of, historians' discovery, not only in India, but from Western side, which relates to Indian history, and also, so therefore, linguistic, archaeological, and historians, etc., we can actually tell what the portion of the Pali Canon is closest to the oldest time. So the type of the commentaries I have an access to in Japanese is always explaining these sutras by, this is the addition, this is the oldest core area, etc., etc. With those textbooks, I'm going to talk with sutras in Pali Canon. I think it should be the way in everywhere. But anyway, so we can tell what is the oldest portion. And then in oldest, closest to Gautama Buddha's time, in those vocally left teachings, there are some remnants that it really actually did happen that way. 100 probably no, but the dozens of the people really gathered. And then in those area, Gautama Buddha, when he sees Makakashapa, always having Makakashapa seated right next to him as if they are equals. So therefore, looking at that, other students must have thought Makakashapa is the most trusted one. And then So they invited both Makakashapa as the someone who basically make an assessment if that is really true or not, and then also asked Ananda to come to this assembly to recite more than anybody else. So most of the time it is Ananda says, when I was traveling with Gautama Buddha with such and such place and assembly was such and such to this group of the people, Gautama Buddha said, and I have heard that. So thus I have heard at such and such place to such and such group of people was the way Ananda started to state. And then also they invited several people who has a good memory. I heard this way, I heard this way. And sometimes there's a discrepancy, and then Ananda and Makakashapa says, well, that doesn't sound right. So probably this version is the right. So this was eventually vocally left. But of course, vocally left tradition is really interesting. I think Buddha's teaching, quality of Buddha's teaching kind of drastically changes at the point of it was started to be written down. The reason is this. Number one, any of us probably in kindergarten or children's daycare center, we had this game. Probably not now because they are so high tech now. But in my time, our toys are so low tech. We create some kind of a, kind of a handmade fake telephone. And then it's just like this way. And it's usually made by paper or, cardboard. And then you place a thread. And then another one is connected to the thread. And then one kid says something like this. And one kid goes like this. And one kid says, and then you hear that. And the next person, you hear that and says, same thing. And the next person do that. And then you experiment 5 to 10 children, and then teachers ask, so what did you say and what did you hear? It's completely different. Not sometimes completely, but quite different. So in that way, very often, sometimes it kind of involves what I wanted to hear, it becomes an addition. And sometimes you have some sort of feeling of saying something respectfully. So there's decoration on the person comes in. Or sometimes you have some sort of aversion to the story and then some sort of aversion comes in. Now, it doesn't particularly mean written down teaching is good because written down teaching also writes down something misunderstood as if it is concrete. So in one way or another, there's some sort of interesting thing happens, but the quality kind of changes. Even mistake quality changes, correctness also changes. Yeah? So it's a very interesting thing. But anyway, thus I have heard, basically meant, it's not just a manualism, but also meant this is the correct thing. This is the correct teaching I have heard. So what happened was, interesting thing is, by the time it is written down, there's at least 300 years have passed. You do know this, that in India, traditional culture does not want to write down something sacred. So for instance, their original Veda was not written down. It was oral tradition as well. So it takes a quite long time until Western influence comes into India, which means Alexander the Great. Very often, Uchiyama Roshi, when he was explaining history of Buddhism, often said, we probably didn't have a Buddhist teaching left to us if Greek didn't come close to India and invaded it. And then it is really quite true, isn't it? And the culture of the Buddhism right now we have also includes the Buddhist statues. So not only written form, Indian originally didn't want to depict something sacred in the form, any kind of form, particularly in the form of a human being. So it takes hundreds of years. So in another word, by the time it was written down as the origin of this current Pali Canon, it was already quite treated. Maybe subtracted, added, or some core portion is inside, but freely portion contradicts with the core portion, etc., etc. That's probably why. But by the time Mahayana Buddhism comes, but Mahayana Buddhism kind of blatantly pulls that portion out. You say this is the right teaching. You say you heard this from Gautama Buddha, but I tell you that is really not correct teaching. So I will say, I will write, even though I didn't hear from him, in the sense to express this is the correct way to understand, I'm going to use the same word. Thus I have heard. So yes, you may say it is a manierism in a literary point of view, but it is also a statement from Mahayana Buddhist teachers who created these sutras. So this is a very interesting portion, even to start with. Thus I have heard. At one time, the Buddha was in the state of... Avatamsaka Sūtra is blatantly saying, this is the right way. This is the right way to teach you what Gautama Buddha said. What Gautama Buddha said is the true reality of this universe, which is interdependent origination. And this is my way, our way, to describe interdependent origination. And it is the right teaching. Thus, I have heard. So, this is very interesting. And of course, by this time, as I mentioned, Satipatthana goes into Shikantaza, in another word. The meditation has developed. So in another word, this chitta is one mind, from Shin to Isshin. So therefore, if you do understand that portion, this description being this way, you can actually kind of agree, in another word. So there's this really strong sense of trusting their practice, their understanding, by going through their own practices instead of thinking about it. Because Abhidharma time, Buddhism was really starting to become a thought system instead of actual practice. So this is a very interesting portion. Now, next one I like to put out is page 13. Let's see. Sight of enlightenment. It says, he was with Aranya Dharma at the site of enlightenment. Aranya Dharma at the site of enlightenment, meaning this is a translation of Jakumetsu Dojo. Did I have that? Write it down. No. But it's okay. Maybe I will write it down. Hold on. I'm going to do a share screen. Okay. And let me use this also. Jakumetsu Dojo. This Ananya is somehow, I don't know why this translators or translator decides to leave some specific words in Sanskrit and decides to some words into English. I don't feel there's a specific, probably he didn't want to use the word Jakumetsu's translation. Jakumetsu is quiet and extinguished. Now, quiet, this is Jakumetsu. Sorry, alphabet. Jakumetsu's jaku is quiet, quietude, silence. Metsu is extinguished. What does that mean? It's nirvana. It's Jakumetsu is often a synonym. Sino-Japanese scripture utilizes nehan, nirvana. So depending on your understanding what the Jakumetsu or nirvana means, it's quite misleading. Well, that's yet another 90 minutes I have to spend. So I'm just going to leave it here. So probably that's why. But in another word, it's a quiet, it's a quiet, sorry, I should say, place of quiet enlightenment. Something like that, yeah? And he was abiding in accordance. So what exactly is sight of enlightenment? Now, sight of enlightenment is translation of this word dojo. Dojo is somehow the type of a lingo utilized as quite all over the places, even in the West, because it is a contemporary language Japanese use as a place for martial art to practice. So when you say dojo, most of the time they are talking about like a karate, kendo, whatever martial art is. But the original intention of the word, it's actually Buddhist terminology. Do is Tao, the way. And then it's Chinese, how do you say, more traditional spiritual practice influence crept into the Buddhism. They usually use the word way, do, as a true reality or one important reality. So, so therefore, to explain place of enlightenment, enlightenment was also translated sometimes as a do. And so therefore, place of enlightenment is translated as a dojo. No. Dojo is the translation, place of enlightenment is the translation, English translation of dojo. But what exactly dojo means by this time? Originally, remember the evolution of Buddhism from ancient Buddhism to Mahayana Buddhism is from literal understanding into more wider, symbolic, spiritual, mental, psychological understanding of what true reality is about. So by this time, dojo means where you practice. So it is really overlapping the understanding of actual place is chosen as a stage, but at the same time, it is really also referring where you practice is anywhere it is dojo. Remember, right before this Avatamsaka Sūtra, Lotus Sutra is already composed and becoming hugely popular. And in Lotus Sutra, it says, everywhere, anywhere, wherever you are practicing, it is called dojo. Yes? So, if it is anywhere, everywhere, it must be something we are talking about is something ever-pervading. So what is ever-pervading is true reality, or ta-ta-ta, or Buddha, or total function, or spring vis-a-vis flower. Yes? So starting from the first two lines, we really start to see almost like a counter statement from Mahayana Buddhism to older Abhidharma movement, Abhidharma Buddhism, which stagnated Buddhist teachings. Now it's like widened. So therefore, as you keep reading on, it is a description of the world and description of the tathata, and it is really repeatedly giving the image of anywhere, everywhere. So the deciding the first scene as dojo, in other words, the site of enlightenment. I'm sorry, you don't need to keep looking at this word. Actual place is Buddhagaya in Magadha. Of course, at that time there was no such a word like Buddhagaya. It is actually created the word many centuries later, based on the legend. But actual place where it really exists and overlapping with the new understanding of what it is quite clever. It is very interesting. But if you really start to see the meaning of the stage, meaning of why this is chosen as a stage, as you keep reading, it is much easier, I think. And then if you take a look at the description of how this place is, the ground was solid. Please take a look at your own textbook. I keep reading the opening portion of page 13. The ground was solid, composed of vajra, and adorned with the most marvelous jeweled wheels, as well as many precious flowers and pure money jewels. So in another word, this is the stage of scene of enlightenment, but at the same time, this is the description of the world of true reality. And then, in another word, it is also internal scene, internal scenery of the lack of a word I would use, enlightenment, but satori no sekai, true reality. So immediately, this world is so described completely, almost oppositionally from old ancient Buddhism. Often describes our world, Shaba world, this ordinary people, shuffling, bustling, hustling, bustling, with all this delusion, usually depicted as a horrible place and dirty place. We don't want to be here, we want to leave. But instead, from a Dharma point of view, none of this is just happening. It's just this and this and this and this of manifestation of entire interdependent origination. And in another word, it is really just a world filled with all this ornamentation, flower ornamentation. And in the middle of that, page 14, Buddha situates himself. At that time, I'm reading towards the end of the page 14. At that time, the Bhagava sitting on this throne. This throne is the translation of Shishiza. In the original language, it is seat of lion. And the seat of lion, lion seat, is translated as the throne. Achieved the supreme and right enlightenment to all dharmas. His knowledge extended equally to all three periods of time. His body filled all worlds, and his voice everywhere accorded with all lands of the 10 directions, just as empty space completely envelopes the many forms without discriminating among any objects. Also, just as space pervades all places, he equally entered all lands. His body forever, everywhere, sat in all sides of enlightenment, in the midst of assemblies of bodhisattvas, where his awe-inspiring radiance shone with a dazzling brilliance, just as the rising sun brightly illuminates the world. Now, we thought at the beginning it was Gautama Buddha was there. But of course, to just kind of overlap the images, the editor or writer of this sutra utilizes the word Bhagavat instead of, how do you say, world-honored one, etc., etc. Bhagava is a very, very old terminology to basically describe the sacred one. So eventually it became a synonym of Buddha, but the reason why they use the word Bhagava, this is the type of the word that shows up in older text, but it's not the type of the word they use just colloquially at this time. We are already 4th century. So the reason why they use this Bhagava is that this is the Buddha of all the time. Buddha of all the time is Shichibutsu, 7 Buddhas, which is actually imaginary Buddha. It is actually an expression of Buddha being this. Yes, true reality is nothing new. This is something that is the how this is ever since the beginning of the beginningless time. So those old Buddha, 7 Buddha, actually it's 6 Buddhas, excluding Gautama Buddha, but it's a description of that. We often talk about this because those are names of the old Buddhas, Shichibutsu, 7 Buddhas, we recite every morning in, Soto school temples. So this Bhagava is no longer, this Tathagata, Bhagava Tathagata is no longer Shakyamuni himself, but it is a metaphor of Vairochana Buddha. Vairochana Buddha is a humanification or personification of what it isness. Yes. It's so it is surrounded by all these people. In another word, it's in the midst of interdependent origination, interestness. It is not the description of someone's here, someone's here, someone's here, someone's here. It's a description of interestness, interdependent origination. If you see the interdependent origination in illustration, it is like this, yeah? But if you have to describe it in words, how would you say that? This and 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 that and this and that. In the midst of that, it is everywhere, anytime, ever-pervading Buddha. Yes, situates itself. So it is like it's a huge net of function. In other words, it's the type of in another word, what it isness, you may rephrase it in many different ways. The function that is creating, it's a function that is active anywhere, anytime. Or the function that is me making me anytime, any place. It's a total function. It's Buddha. Sometimes we call it in Japanese, we call it as ohataraki-sama. Ohataraki-sama means function, but we call it as a revelated way. O at the postfix, sama, O as a prefix, sama is postfix, makes it honorable. So we call it ohataraki-sama. Or sometimes we call it this oinochi-sama. Inochi is life, life itself, but O postfix, sama, prefix, sama postfix makes it is polite to call it. I really like to call this as a ohataraki-sama because it really resonates. It is really a function. It's a constant function, and it's available anytime, anyway. And it's also, it makes me function, whatever it is I'm calling as me. It is something, it is a huge net of interdependent origination that makes your lung keeps breathing, your heart keeps beating while you are completely unaware of it. That's what we call Buddha, Tatata, Tathagata, Vairochana, Dharmakaya, many different names. Why many different names? Because we don't want to consolidate into just one simple concept. Then it becomes a separate thing. It's just become a concept. Instead, we really like to have moment by moment of this deeply seated understanding. Oh, it's just like a total function. Oh, I will just call it this Mr. Buddha or Mr. Function or Mr. Life. So this is a very interesting portion. If we keep doing this, it will take like maybe 100 years to read the whole Avatamsaka Sūtra. But I like to continue a little more in detail at the beginning. And then eventually, as the chapter goes on, I think each one of you will probably get a taste of it, and then probably get used to their way of describing Dharma. So it will become much easier. So until that portion comes, I'll just try to explain a little more in detail. But eventually I will skip the portion. So if you do have some portions I don't mention, but you want to know a little more, again, as I said, please send me an email, but with the page number and chapter number and page number. Otherwise, I don't think I have time to go through all these pages to where it is. So anyway, we have tomorrow again as an intensive for this month. So I'm stopping here today, and I'm going to pick up where I leave today, tomorrow morning. Session number 3. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon, and I see you tomorrow.